Chairman Corker, Ranking Member Menendez, for holding this important hearing on the world's greatest humanitarian crisis caused by the ongoing conflict in Yemen. And I'd like to thank our three witnesses both for appearing before the committee and for your service in this difficult challenge confronting us with so many other pressing challenges in the Middle East, not just this crisis in Yemen, but also our military action against Syria over the weekend. I'm just going to echo what Senator Menendez said at the outset, that it is more important than ever that the administration formulate and deliver a comprehensive strategy to the Congress and the American people so that we can better engage with and understand and judge what is the path forward in terms of confronting and restraining Iran's aggressive behavior, which I think is a central cause of this ongoing conflict in Yemen, and as a critical driver of Bashar al-Assad's barbarism in Syria. And I will insist that we need to hear more from the President and his team represented here by way of a comprehensive strategy in the near future. But let's today continue to drill down on some of the specifics in this particular conflict, if we could. Humanitarian access first. Senator Young asked a number of questions admirably. He's been very engaged on the issue of humanitarian access through ports. Let me just add, if I could, a question about the closure of Sanaa's airport because of military strikes led by the Saudi coalition. Sanaa's airport has largely been closed to humanitarian relief and assistance and to those who might seek to leave for medical purposes. How can we address Saudi Arabia's legitimate security concerns around that airport and its use for the importation of weapons, while at the same time making it possible for civilians trapped in Houthi-controlled areas to get medical care, to get food, to get clean water? Ambassador Satterfield, if you'd start us off.
Senator, you've singled out exactly the reasons why Sanaa Airport should be fully opened for movements in and out, not just for humanitarian, so labeled purposes, but general purposes as well. How best to assure that the genuine concerns of Saudi Arabia are met? There are a variety of regimes that have been put successfully in place to, for lack of a better word, sterilize or assure that cargoes and people moving in and out of the airport are what they ought to be, without significantly diminishing the ability of the airport to function. We, the United Nations, have repeatedly proposed such regimes. Some have worked partially. The airport has a greater level of operation today than it did if we go back to early and mid-November, but more needs to be done. And we believe the mechanisms are out there. The UN is willing to participate in them, and we think they can be made to work.
Thank you for that answer. Let me talk just a little bit more about water shortages, as several of you have spoken to. Both the Houthis and the Saudis have blocked deliveries of water to civilians and destroyed water infrastructure, which has in large part contributed to water scarcity, to the world's greatest cholera outbreak. Do you believe access to and control over water is one of the drivers of the conflict in Yemen? And how does that exacerbate the humanitarian crisis, and what can we best do to tackle the access to clean water challenges?
Senator, in Yemen, control over water resources is not one of the primary drivers of the conflict. Yemen is blessed with a variety of water supplies not found elsewhere in the Middle East. The problem with water, and I'll defer to my colleague from AID, is the elimination of reliable electricity supplies to purification and water treatment plants, appropriate sewage disposal. It's a very basic phenomenon, but it stems from restrictions on electricity delivery, which in turn are the product of some damage to transmittal lines, but more importantly, lack of consistent supplies of affordable fuel.
Mr. Jenkins.
The ambassador nailed it on that one. Basically, when you see or hear in Yemen about fuel not getting to where it needs to go, that immediately correlates itself to people not being able to pump the water that they need, not being able to fuel the generators that keep the lights on in hospitals. And water is a critical problem for the humanitarian situation.
Let me ask, if I might, one last question. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, has been cited as one of the more lethal terrorist organizations in the world. Do you think AQAP is a greater threat to the United States now than it was at the beginning of the conflict back in September of 2015? Have we had any successes in degrading their capabilities? And most importantly, I think, from a security perspective, given the quote Senator Young just shared with us that food crises grow terrorists, What about our alignment, our strategy, our engagement might make us less secure today as a result of the conduct of the last 3 years?
Senator, as you know, we had a relatively sizable presence in Yemen prior to the conflict, focused with the legitimate government of Yemen in going after AQAP because of the specific threat it poses to the homeland. That presence and our activities were significantly undermined by the collapse of the government and the outbreak of civil war in 2014 and 2015. We have made strides in reconstituting our efforts through our local partnerships, first with the legitimate government of Yemen, as well as with other partner forces who are on the ground. But AQAP remains a significant threat. They have benefited from the civil war that has created open territory and safe areas for them. But as the Emiratis in particular have made progress in helping the government of Yemen maintain control in certain areas, it has denied more area to AQAP. We nevertheless have continued to have to take a number of strikes against this very significant terrorist threat, and so it remains a challenge, but we are making progress.
Thank you. All I'll say in conclusion is it's clearly both in our humanitarian interest and in our national security interest to reach a resolution of this conflict as soon as is possible. Thank you.